Hey Marie, how's it going?
It's going good. How are you?
I am doing great. And Sharon, how you doing?
Oh, great. Thanks for asking,
Awesome.
Jesse.
We are kicking off this new podcast. If you were already subscribed to the weekly build, and now we are pivoting and calling it ADHD Founders and welcoming a third host, Sharon Pope. Sharon, why don't you start us off and do kind of an intro about yourself so listeners, get your story.
Yes. Well, so on this podcast, we all three are ADHD founders, and we're excited to talk about the chaos of being founders and also dealing with ADHD and shiny objects and all those fun things, and how it helps us and how it sometimes can be challenging. I am one of said ADHD founders. I have a company called Shelpful. It rhymes with helpful. And we make a service that helps you get your shit done, helps you stick to your tasks and habits. And I built it off of my very own struggle with, at the time, undiagnosed ADHD, where I just prayed that I could have a little just like a little guy sitting on my shoulder, telling me to drink water or to step outside or to actually take care of myself when I was taking such good care of my work, working crazy hours and take care of my family. And I couldn't remember if I took a sip of water. So I wanted this so desperately, so I made it. So essentially, you text with an AI task manager, and you can add a human coach onto that chat. So you have this support system and hype squad that chats with you, reminds you to do your stuff, and keeps you going and makes you feel less alone and all the stuff. Before I did Shelpful, I was working in Silicon Valley as head of marketing, head of product. I worked at a lot of startups, and I worked at Y Combinator, which is kind of like the Harvard of
I've heard of it.
startups.
Yeah, I've
Yes.
heard of it.
So I worked in-house there as like a marketing advisor. And so I've seen a lot of companies be built, and I've heard from a lot of smart founders. And I will tell you, you can hear all this stuff, but it doesn't ever prepare you for actually building a company yourself. So I feel I'm in the throes of it, and always excited to be able to talk to fellow founders because we share the same struggles, and plus one for ADHD founders because we all have so much in common.
Totally, totally. Yeah, I love the idea of Shelpful, and we've partnered before with different things. I did a course, and we connected with Shelpful, and people loved that. Found it really helpful using Shelpful to get those reminders. Yeah, I think that's great.
And Marie, we did
Yeah.
too. That's kind of how we all, well, how I know you too, is just
Yeah. Yeah,
partnering.
we did a little partnership thing where everyone that was doing Shelpful was also using my product,
Llama Life.
Llama
So on
Life.
that, Marie, do you want to
On
tell
that
us a little about
note.
yourself and Llama Life?
Sure. So my name is Marie Ng, and I make an app called Llama Life, which helps people with ADHD with tasks and routines. And the way Llama Life is different is that it allows you to create a list of things that you want to do, but for every single task on your list, you can easily attach a countdown timer. And similar to Sharon, this kind of came out of my own struggles. It was something that I really wanted for myself because I found that timers really help me focus and, specifically short timers. And there are a lot of apps out there that kind of let you do something similar, but usually the timers that they let you set are longer, like 25 minutes. But I really wanted something that would let you set like 1 minute or 5 minutes super quickly. So I actually built the first version of Llama Life during like COVID lockdowns. And it wasn't actually meant to be a product for people. It was just meant to be for myself because I was also teaching myself how to code and I'd learned a lot of theory, but I hadn't actually put it into practice. So Llama Life was actually like the first version was just me trying to practice what I learned. And I put it on X, which was Twitter back then. And immediately someone said, "Oh my God, what is this? Like, where can I get this?" And I just said, "Well, it's nothing. Like, it's just a little project that I'm doing. You can't actually get it." And I continued to share my journey of building this product. And more people just kept saying, like, "I want this, I want this." So I was like, okay, well, you know what? Let me see if I can make it into something more. And I always came at it from a learning perspective. So there was not as much pressure at the beginning like you would get from a traditional startup because I wasn't thinking it was going to be really big. I was just thinking like, oh, I'll learn more stuff by adding more things to it and building a website and adding payments or subscriptions, etc. And it was all from a learning perspective
And building it for yourself, which
and
is,
building
I
it
think,
for
huge.
myself.
Like, let's underline
Yeah,
that a bunch because,
yeah.
like, that's the best products have come from people solving their own problem. I think
Yeah,
that's
every
so
every
important.
feature I put in was like, I really need this and I can't find this anywhere. And
Mhm.
even if I could find something a little bit similar, it wasn't exactly how I wanted it. And one of the things with Llama Life is like, I try and make it like a bit whimsical and fun and very simple, deceptively simple, I would say. But I like this fun, quirky element, and I always try and build that in. So a lot of it's just like what I wanted to do, and somehow it's kind of resonated with a group of people as well. And it kind of just has grown from there.
It's also beautiful design.
Oh,
It's
thank you.
very lovely. Yeah.
Yeah. And before Llama Life, I had done a couple of other startups, but I'd also worked in corporate in like advertising, branding kind of world. So yeah, I try and kind of bring some of that into the business side as well, combining doing software development, design, and also branding and marketing. And Jesse, what about you?
Yeah, so I'm kind of a weird founder. I don't even necessarily think of myself as a founder usually, but I guess I should because I have a company and it makes money and things like that. It's just not a SaaS product, so it feels sort of different. But I have a creator business. So I have like a paid newsletter. I'm an author. I have a book, so I have money coming in, that way for selling my book. And I also do, just content creation, YouTube videos, and a lot of stuff on social media. And that's sort of the base of what I do. But I am also a designer and developer, so I've like been doing that for most of my life. And I have app ideas that I kind of feel like this is going to be fun on the podcast because I'm right in the midst of working on like a baby app that I'm hoping to launch soon. And so it'll be fun where we can sort of talk about strategies with that and sort of
Now, is
like
that
see the different
an
stages.
app about babies or a
No, no,
little
no,
baby,
no,
like
no. Yeah,
just
good
baby idea?
clarification. A brand new idea that
Got
does
it.
not, yeah, it's has not yet reached MVP, the minimum viable product. But that's the goal, is to really try and hit that quickly so that we can get people using it, and then hopefully that will become kind of my full time thing. In addition to the creator business that I have, which if you don't know me, the content creation I do is all about ADHD. So I found out that I had it in my mid 30s, and then a few years later, after learning everything I could about it, I started writing about it online. And actually there was a writing challenge called Ship 30 for 30, and I prior to that had no aspirations to be a writer, but for some reason something about that challenge like sparked that little novelty part of my brain. It's like, oh, that sounds fun. And I thought I was going to write about like design and like other things, but I also wanted to write a few things about ADHD because I'd learned a bunch of stuff. And that was clearly the content like that people were interested in. Like a lot of people were wanting more and more. And so I just kind of kept writing about that.
And it's so relatable.
Yeah. And that's actually how we met,
Right.
because
Yeah.
you had a ship 30 for 30 little article that you wrote, which was on Twitter, X, and I saw it and I think I made a comment, and then we started DMing maybe. And I
Yeah.
don't know, it was a bit
Something
there,
like
but it's
that.
definitely through that.
Right, because back then, when I started Ship 30 for 30, I'd been on Twitter since 2007, so it had been like a really long time. But my Twitter following was like maybe 1,000 people, and so which on Twitter is like everybody has 1,000 people. That's like nothing. And then now it's since then it's exploded. But I remember that. Yeah, I remember meeting around that time and connecting with you and other people on Twitter with ADHD. It was fun watching kind of all of the things with Llama Life like develop as you were just sort of, building, showing your work along the way, which is awesome.
And the other cool thing is like, this is a podcast about building businesses and ADHD and how it presents challenges with building businesses. But the cool thing is that we all have businesses at different stages. So, you're saying I was building Llama Life in public on Twitter. Just for some additional context, Llama Life's been around for about 4 years now, I would say. And Jesse, you're thinking about building a little baby or a business that's in its infancy, like right at the beginning. And
Right.
Sharon, how long Shelpful been around for?
We've been doing it for since 2021, so similar to you, Marie. I want to answer 2 years. Like that's the what I want to say, but it's just
Mm.
not true. It's flown by. It's way longer than it feels like.
How big is your company? Like, how many do you have employees, stuff like that?
Yeah, so Shelpful, I have 2 other co-founders, and then we have a software developer, and we have some contractors who we work with for design, and we have, accountability coaches who help our members, and they work as a contractor as well. So, as like 1099 contractors, kind of like
Right.
Uber for accountability. And so, yeah, we're still a pretty small team, and we're purposely small. I think that hiring is the fastest way to spend a lot of money. So we really try to hold back on any of those instincts to hire unless we kind of prove there's a job there and that job can kind of pay for itself in a matter of speaking. So yeah, we're purposely small.
Yep. And I'm going through an interesting transition at the moment where Llama Life started off as just myself, and then I hired 2 people to help me with it. But recently, I just had to, unfortunately, make some cuts and had to let those 2 people go. Nothing to do with them. They were amazing people and we loved working together, but the business couldn't survive paying 3 people, basically. So I'm back to being myself, doing all the different roles in a business, which has a lot of challenges, and we can talk about that during the pod. But that's kind of where I'm at as well. It's kind of a very big change. This just happened at the end of 2024, so 2 months ago, and I'm still kind of adjusting to it. But it's been interesting. It's a different kind of business now.
When Marie and I were talking about it, I was like, "So you're a cockroach?" And she was like, "I think," you were like, "What?" And I was like, "No, no, 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 it's a good thing." I was like Paul Graham, like famous startup guy, investor and leader and prolific writer about startups. He would call people cockroaches, famously could survive an apocalypse. And so that to him was a high compliment, which meant a founder had grit. They had like decision making and judgment to slim down, reduce, and just survive while they figure things out. And not that, yeah. So I was that was I was I remember Marie kind
My
of like, well, I
face, I was
mean,
like, oh.
I was like, wait, 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 no, no, it was a
Not an
good thing.
insult. Not an insult.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I want someone to call me a cockroach someday. I don't know if I am a cockroach yet. Well, I think, and a lot of the biggest startups and most successful startups we know were cockroaches at some point. Like
Yeah.
Airbnb almost died a million times.
Because there were like 20 different companies that just sort of cockroached and rolled into the next sort of company they wanted to be until they found something that really worked for them, which is awesome.
Until they could find an investor, they financed their company with taking out a bunch of personal credit cards, and so they really slugged their way through it. But those are, until you find the audience and find that product market fit, that's the best thing you can do sometimes as a founder.
You got to kind of think about what's most important. And for me, it was like trying to keep the product alive because a lot
Yeah.
of people were or are depending on it. And that was the only way to keep it alive was to go, okay, well, we've got to make some really tough decisions. And it was probably one of the hardest things I've had to do, actually. It's so hard telling someone like you don't have a job anymore. And,
Especially
obviously
someone you
tried
love
to
working with.
we loved we loved
Yeah.
working with each other. We had so much fun, and a lot of
Yeah.
people said to us, like, that came through in our comms, in our socials, in our newsletters, and they were saying, a large part of why they use the product is because they like our vibe. And that's a very hard thing to create. And well, I guess it sort of just happened naturally, which is the nice thing. Like it's really hard to manufacture something like that, so to get it naturally was like such a bonus and such a pleasure to work with these folks every day. So it was so hard doing, telling them that, and obviously harder for them because they had to go find something else. It had to be done to keep the product alive and keep working on it and see where it goes.
Yeah. That's hard. And Jesse, what's your operation like for extra focus?
About a year ago, I was like trying to find like maybe I could hire a virtual assistant that could help with some stuff. And I did that for 3 months and it did not work out. And I mostly blame myself. Like the person I hired, they were great. I was just not prepared to give them enough. Like my hope was they were just going to magically like know all the things to do and like uh ask me for the thing, like take a lot of my problems away. And that kind of wasn't what happened. So that's what initially, I think when we started doing that, I had some very clear tasks and we're able to tackle those, get those done, which worked really well. And it was amazing. And then I was kind of hoping for them to take on some other stuff and it just kind of didn't work out. And then I was like, I'm spending just as much time trying to get this rolling and I don't think it's going to help out the way that I want. So I've stopped doing that and I'm just sort of doing it myself. But I do, unlike both of you, like I have a separate full-time job. So I'm doing managing a lot of this stuff in my spare time, which I have a family. I've got, I'm married with 3 kids. And so that available time is pretty limited. My hope is that at some point, maybe this year, hopefully this year, things would change to where I could be like, okay, I'm doing this full time. And maybe this new baby app that's not baby related could be part of that.
I just thought I should clarify. You're a dad. I don't
Yeah.
know.
No, that's a good clarification.
There's a big market for baby
Yeah.
apps, you know.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely. Yeah, I'm not going to be the one to do it, but yes. My kids are past that stage, so my kids are in there like 8 to 14. I do think one thing that works really well, like thinking of my own sort of unfair advantage for this app that I'm going to be like building and working on, is that I have an audience, and so I kind of have a built-in customer pool that I can like reach out to my audience, and anyone that's within that group that's interested, like that helps because I don't have to advertise to start with to
Yeah.
build that audience. Like I
I
already
mean,
have
unfair
people
advantage or
interested.
something you worked really hard to build.
Well,
I just like,
unfair. I mean, there's a book called Unfair Advantage or
oh, yeah,
something like that. And the
yeah,
idea in the book is that everybody has unfair advantages,
yeah,
and so you just need to kind of figure out what yours are and lean into them. And so
yeah,
that's one of the things, is that I happen to have this thing that, yes, I worked really hard and built it, which is awesome. But because I have it, like I should use that. And kind of like what you both were saying about like building a product, solving your own problem. I guess I'm sort of dancing around it because I'm not quite announcing the app yet, but it is like solving kind of my own problem, my own
yeah.
difficulty. And that's what the app will be working on. So we'll probably talk about that more in a future episode.
And being tapped into a community, obviously, yeah, you worked really hard to build your specific community, but I mean, there's a community for every product that somebody might want to build. And I think that
Right.
like a first great step is immersing yourself in that. If you're not solving your own problem, if you're solving your like husband's problem, or, if there's someone who's close to you that you're kind of focused on for a product, like digging in and just living and breathing and sitting among it, I think can help you because you feel the problems more tangibly. And and I think that a lot of us probably, but I'll speak for myself, I thought that I was the only one who had the problems that I had. And
Right. Yeah.
which I guess bringing it back to ADHD, which mostly I now attribute to ADHD, but I was like, why am I excelling at work, but I like can't make a dentist appointment, and all those things where I just judge myself so harshly for. And it wasn't until I launched Shelpful and people signed up saying, I have ADHD, I have ADHD. This will help me because I have ADHD. And I was like, whoa. I've asked doctors multiple times if I had this, and they very confidently told me no. And
Right.
I think someone was messing with me. So, I mean, I was almost diagnosed initially by my own customers. And then I had that opportunity to dig in more and learn more about my brain and just know that I wasn't the only one, which gave me a lot of fuel to keep building. Because it wasn't just, yes, it started just for me, but I very quickly felt that it was for more than me. Like I was actually helping other people.
Yeah, in terms of like my ADHD origin story, I was diagnosed later as well, like in my like 30s, and when I was at work, and I mean, I had these issues for going back to childhood, obviously, and just never really knew what the problem was. It's like, why do I have this problem? Like, why am I always having to try so much harder for certain things? But there was a lot of masking going on for like a lot of my adult life, which I didn't realize. It'd be so bad that I'd go to work and I'd be masking and I'd get home and I'd be so exhausted and I couldn't figure out why I was so exhausted. It was because I was trying to fit into a structure, a neurotypical kind of structure or corporate environment that wasn't really for me. And I was quite lucky in the sense that one of my coworkers has ADHD, and I was sitting, literally sitting like right next to him, and kind of describing all these issues that I was having. And he just looked at me and said, "Oh, I think you have ADHD." And I was like, "No, like it never even crossed my mind, like not once ever crossed my mind that I could have
That's because of
ADHD."
the whole ADHD having the PR problem, where everyone's heard of it,
Exactly.
but everyone
Yeah.
thinks it's something totally different.
Everybody thinks it's young boys who are super like hyperactive, physically hyperactive, running in circles and disrupting. And I was disrupting in other ways. But
Talks
you
a
know,
lot in class. That was me.
I didn't actually talk a lot in class, but I'd get up a lot,
Yeah.
and that wasn't as noticeable in the classroom because it's probably a masking thing as well. But I'm not about to get up and just walk around the classroom. Whereas in a corporate environment, I get up whenever I want. I'll get up and I'll go to the bathroom. I'll get up and I'll make a coffee. I'll get up to go talk to someone. But I was moving around all the time, and we had an open plan office, and my boss actually sat opposite me in this open plan office. And when I got my performance review, it was always stuff like, "Oh, you're doing really well, doing great, but you get up like way too much and you're distracting other people." Because I'm in her eye line as well, right? She's looking right opposite me and she's like, "You're just getting up all the time. Like, you need to like stay seated more." It's just little things like that that get mentioned, but that's hyperactivity in a different way. That's like a
Yeah.
restlessness.
Yeah.
And there's also hyperactivity mentally, right? You're kind of thinking about a lot of things, and to the point where it's sort of your brain flatlines. At least this happens to me. It's not that I'll have this thing where like my brain's going 100 miles an hour, but at some point it can't handle it. So it just flatlines and then everything just is like a haze, and it's like you're in like brain fog. That's to me, that's what brain fog is. My brain got too hyper and can't deal with it. So it just shut down.
And helpfully sometimes, or is hyperactivity manifesting as hyperfocus, where
Yeah.
you are the like unstoppable creature who can get anything done, and like which is why a boss might think, wow, you can do anything, because you kind of are a dog with a bone if there's something that's interesting to you, or if there's something that is like has really serious deadlines that are looming. A
Yeah.
deadline tomorrow like is just a drug for
Fire.
someone with ADHD.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, no one, yeah, and women specifically, I guess, just to say that because of this stigma that is all little boys bouncing off the walls. I was literally, I mean, two different times. I was seriously like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I need like this is I'm like, my brother has ADHD. I
Oh my gosh.
do I have this because I can't focus? And they're like, no. Wait, what kind of grades did you get? Well, pretty good grades. How are you doing at work? Well, I've gotten promoted a lot in the last year.
Hmm.
And nope, you couldn't have it. It's not, you wouldn't be doing well at work. And I was just like, I was like, okay, I guess.
Hmm. Yeah.
And it just, it's obviously hard to look back at those things because the diagnosis of ADHD was such a gift in just
Yeah.
allowing myself to figure out systems that worked for me and not judging myself so harshly for
Mm.
the areas I felt lacking.
Yeah, I feel like that's the piece that a lot that is really missing with the because I hear that story a lot with somebody literally going to the doctor and like saying, "Hey, I think I have this," and just getting dismissed out of hand with the same sort of thing, like, "Oh, you graduated college, so you can't possibly have ADHD," or something like
Yeah.
that. And it's like, yeah, but you don't know the amount of like shame and guilt and self blame that's happening
Yeah.
underneath for any of that to happen.
And how many all-nighters I pulled, like
Right.
that, yeah, like what it looked like to have me get those grades and graduate.
If I don't know the behind the scenes, like I remember just before like an English exam that we had, like where you got to write a couple of essays on books that you had the whole semester to read. I didn't read the books. And it was like the night before, and I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to read? There was two books. I'm like, how am I going to read these two books the night before? I'm going to write two essays on them tomorrow. And I went out. This is like way back. This is kind of like maybe showing my age, but had to go to the store and get like the video cassette of these two books. Like they'd made one of them was a play, and there was like a movie of the play, and another one was just a film. So I rented both those movies, and I watched them. And then I went to the exam the next day, and I just hoped that the movies were very similar to the books because they were based on the books. And I got a B plus.
Yeah.
Yep.
There you go.
And it
And
was
then you're like, I'm never reading a book again.
yeah.
Books are a
Yeah.
waste of time, clearly. Except for your book, Jesse.
Right, of course.
Our English teacher said to us, like, when you go into the exam, there's going to be a few different questions, and some of the questions are going to be like analytical questions, which are easier to write an essay around, and some are going to be creative ones where you have to maybe pretend to be a character. He goes, don't pick the creative ones. It's really hard to get a good mark on a creative piece versus a more analytical, like you're breaking down like a scene or a structure. And I get in and I look at the questions and I'm like, oh my God, I can't answer like any of the analytical ones. I don't know. I can't answer them based on this movie. So I was like, I'm going to pick the creative question. And I just did that. And yeah, it worked out. But this is to your point, Sharon, like B plus, not too bad. That's a fairly decent mark, right? And so
Yeah.
they're like, yeah, you're good. You're good.
You're
I'm
good.
like, yeah, but you don't
You couldn't
understand how
possibly
hard it
have
was to get here.
ADHD. Yeah, exactly. The struggle
Right,
behind the
right.
Yeah.
scenes.
It's like, oh, you got a B plus, you have no problem. It's like you just don't
Yeah.
understand the behind the scenes.
Yeah. And you're like,
Yeah.
it could have been an A plus. That's the other factors like what could have been. It could have been so much better
Yeah.
if I'd known what the
Right.
problem
Oh,
was.
and we're
Right.
so good at knowing what things could have been.
Could
I
have
feel like
been.
I
Yeah.
always, which is actually like with product work, is makes it hard to ship stuff sometimes because I definitely in the past I've gotten better at it now, but in the past, like I want the feature of this product I'm working on to be perfect. I have this vision of what it's like, and it's so hard to basically I had to learn through experience of like releasing something early and just being like, okay, I want these 3 features, but I'm going to move that down here to the version 2 column, and then let's ship the first one. And then what I ended up finding through experience, like, one, people loved the first version without those extra features, and two, I didn't care about those features as much once it was live. Like the little extra things I wanted to add to it in the time when I was working on it, it seemed critical. But then once that other thing was out and people were using it, I was like, oh, it probably doesn't actually need that yet. We could maybe
Yes.
do that some later date or something.
Yes, we should. I would feel like we could do a whole episode sharing because I think those examples are super helpful, especially getting specific. Because I think we three know that ADHDers over-index in being founders and entrepreneurs because we
Mhm.
love that being able to work on things that interest us, and that's kind of the
Mhm.
definition of an entrepreneur. Except the paperwork, we don't like that. But the, but that, yeah, I mean, like I'm craving hearing more about the story too, Jesse, where it's hard for anyone to, I think, shred something down and feel really like what is that minimally viable product MVP that we always talk about in startup world, and like what does that look like, and how can you just get it out, and then how does it feel when it's out? I think that's I'd love to dive more into that with all of us
I've definitely experienced that too.
Yeah, I think that'd be super fun.
on a future episode, everyone. I wonder if, because we kind of did the diagnosis thing a little bit, maybe each
Mhm.
of us, or I don't know, just kind of sharing, like if I were entrepreneurial, if I were trying to think of a business, and I was wondering if I had an ADHD, what could you say to a doctor? What could you say to, like, how can you put this in place? Because I almost feel like that was the question unanswered that maybe if someone was
Mhm.
listening to this and wasn't diagnosed would have.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Tell me what you think.
My tip would be write notes before you go in. So I went to a psychiatrist to get diagnosed, and the way that it gets diagnosed is by having a conversation with a psychiatrist, somebody who specializes in ADHD, and they're going to ask you a bunch of questions. And those questions are not all going to be about like what did you do last week? They're going to go all the way back to your childhood from about 7 years old. And if you're on the spot and you can't think of stuff, that is going to hinder the diagnosis. So I would spend time in advance just trying to think, just write down all the different things and all the struggles that you've had going back to childhood with examples, and
Mhm.
take that into your diagnosis session.
I agree. That's something I often tell people. It's really easy to be like, oh, I think maybe I have this, and then schedule an appointment and then show up. And then they start asking questions and you don't know the answer because, like, I can't even remember back then, like, oh, you're going to ask about all these things. I had no idea that was going to happen. So I recommend like carrying around like a little like field notes or something, like a notebook with you. So you can, at any time you think of something that happened that you can write it down, like something that you feel in your life may have been related to ADHD, especially if it's like from your childhood, because they'll ask a lot about that. It's almost like they're looking for reasons to dismiss your plea for diagnosis or whatever. And one of the things is if you have no stories from your childhood, they'll say, oh, it's probably something else. It's stress related or
Stress.
something
Yeah.
else.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to make sure you remember, and maybe it's like maybe you need to talk with a family member that'll help you remember some of the things. Because a lot of times you'll reach out to someone and be like, "Hey, I'm trying to remember times that maybe evidence of when if I had ADHD or not." And someone might be like, "Oh, you definitely had it. Remember when you did this and this and this?" And that'll really help you remember some of those like obvious signs that you can tell, a practitioner that's looking to diagnose you. The other thing that they're going to be looking for is that it affects you in your current situation and in multiple places. And so if it only affects you at your job and that's all you say, they might dismiss that because the technical, it's different in different countries. But I think Australia, where you're at, Marie, I think they also use the DSM-5, which is what is used in the US.
I'm actually not sure because I got diagnosed in the US because I used to live in the US.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, I don't
I
know.
feel I feel like they like in Europe they have a different similar sort of manual. But anyway, the DSM-5, which is in the US and several other countries, part of the diagnostic criteria is that it happens in two or more places. So that would be like work and home, or like home and school, or something like that. And so that's one thing they're going to be looking for. And I really recommend just looking up the DSM-5 and what those things are. Or, hey, if you buy my book, I have them listed in there as well.
Yes.
There's 3 different presentations, and there's like a list of like 8 symptoms and under each one. And then you have to have checked the box for like 5 or more of those to qualify or whatever for diagnosis, which is dumb because there's way more to ADHD than that criteria. But you want to educate yourself on that so that because they're not going to advocate for you unless you're really lucky. So you really need to advocate for yourself in that process. And like if they say that sort of thing like, "Oh, you graduated college," or "Oh, you're doing good in your job," then it's like, "Okay, cool, time for a different opinion because I'm not going to this person clearly doesn't understand ADHD enough to actually diagnose me."
First of all, plus one to everything you guys said. I think the two things to add are you may know more about ADHD than the doctor. I think and things have
You
changed
most
so
likely
much.
will. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so that like I think that in addition to looking at the DSM-5, look up or buy Jesse's book. Look up, but I think I can't remember if you touched on this, Jesse, is how different traits of ADHD manifest in different types of people. Adults different than children, women different than men. Um, and so just so you know, because you may not realize, oh, that's an inattentive trait. Like I can't change my laundry. Inattentive trait. Like you're able to actually that I think helps fuel those notes that you guys mentioned because you actually are starting from a place of just better awareness of what actually is how ADHD looks on a daily basis. And yeah, I think that the difference between all the other times and the time I got diagnosed was I just had my big advocate pants on. I wasn't gonna like if I knew that if they were like it's just anxiety, I would be able to say, well, my research shows that anxiety is actually a comorbidity of untreated ADHD. Like I feel anxious because I don't have tools to deal with what's going on. And I was just able to kind of I knew enough at that point that I knew that I was very confident I had it. And so yeah, like Jesse said, I would have either found someone else. It was my primary care was kind of the initial one I talked to, but I was able to navigate that not with any I honestly didn't have any specific intention other than just understanding myself better or being able to explain why I felt I sucked at life for my
Yeah,
whole
yeah.
life at the age of
Mm,
38. Like that was my goal. And when I look back at that process, which was kind of a long process, that's what I value so much in that was just giving myself some grace,
mm,
giving myself a break for those things that I felt I sucked at. And then actually the journey of seeing them as assets rather than,
mhm.
something that
Yeah.
sucked.
There is a question about do you even need to get diagnosed? And
Right.
you need to think about like your reason for getting diagnosed. Not everybody needs to be. I'm a bit similar to you, Sharon. Like I found it very validating.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to get medication, you do need a diagnosis for that. But if you're not planning to go on medication and maybe you don't need the validation, or you're happy with your own validation, that you'll go, well, I'm pretty sure that this is what's happening to me. And I sort of know that. And because you know it, and I think that's a really important thing, that you know it. Because for me, it was like, now that I know, I can actually look up self-help and I can figure out some potential solutions. But when I
Mhm.
didn't know, that's when things get crazy, because you can't figure out why these things are happening and what's, quote unquote, wrong with you, and like, what's
Mhm.
happened, why can't I do this? So knowing was very important to me, but knowing doesn't equal getting you don't have to get a diagnosis to know, right? So I think an important question to yourself would be, do I need a diagnosis? Like, am I happy without one? Like, if I feel confident enough that this is what's happening, I don't need medication, or don't want medication, I'm okay. Like, I know myself, and that's fine. Like, so that could be another angle. Like, you don't necessarily have to, but
Yeah.
it depends on your needs. Like, what do you need?
A couple things I do want to mention real quick, because we said DSM-5 a few times. That stands for the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition. So just DSM-5, in case anyone's like scrambling to, what did they say? The BSM, like trying to look it up. That's what it is. But yeah, with that, I think similarly, like when I first got diagnosed, my goal wasn't medication. I did end up trying some and it didn't work out, but that's a whole, maybe we'll talk about that on a
Whole
different
episode.
episode.
Yeah.
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 But I will say, I think it's very common for people that do have ADHD, even when they think like, oh, I found it, this is it, now I know what this is, weeks later to be like, I probably don't have it, I'm probably just really lazy and a terrible person, and all
No.
of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Because there's so much shame with growing up with ADHD,
Hmm.
it's really easy to fall back into that, like, oh no, actually I just suck. I think there's a lot of power to getting, even though the whole, as we've discussed, the whole diagnosis process is pretty fraught with a bunch of issues, there's still something kind of powerful of somebody like saying you have this thing. That
Yeah.
label really, like, because I've like worked with different like potential sponsors and stuff like that, I've actually been diagnosed 3 separate times through 3 like different companies and stuff
Oh,
like that.
funny. So we're pretty sure you got it.
Pretty sure. And yet every time I've done that, I get a little bit nervous of like, am I going to find out that I don't actually have it this time? Maybe I'm just this lazy, terrible, selfish person.
Oh, funny.
And so it's always a nice little relief when I'm like, okay, yes, I do still have it.
Still rocking. I think that that's so important. And Marie, you brought that up. It really resonated with me because people have reached out to me and said, I'm not diagnosed, but I think I have it. And like, what do you think I should do in terms of like building systems into their lives? And I talk a lot about that, of like trying to work with your own brain and how your brain is. And I think that, like, yes, the journey can be long. So say you're an entrepreneur, say this is resonating with you and you're not diagnosed, then yes, it's hard for us to do administrative tasks and book appointment stuff. So all that could take longer for someone with ADHD than it would for us. It's like the first way to prove you have ADHD is to have difficulty booking appointments to get diagnosed is probably true. But I think I kind of tell people, like, consider that you do, because I think that brains are so different. All of these kind of unique diversities in our brains are just a truth of society, and we have labels for them, that are called disorders, which isn't a word I like either. And but if you are resonating with things that we're saying and things you've heard other ADHDers say, then just start taking that on board. Like, if you have difficulty getting the laundry done, then accept, I'm a person, my brain has difficulty with that task. So I should
Hmm.
make some other way for myself. I should accept that that's just something that's hard for me. And it's okay for that to be hard for you, because hard things for other people might be easy for you. I would rather start a company than book a dentist appointment. Like, easy, or then call a dentist office on the phone. Like, that's actually the worst thing for
Oh
me.
my God, I have so
So
many
like,
Yep.
stories, but we can save them. There's so many things that I've done that are excessive to avoid doing a small problem,
yes,
which would have taken like 2 minutes.
on Llama Life, it would have been 1 minute.
Yeah, I love what you just said there, because it's really like you built a product for something that you felt guilty and bad about, like needing that help. And Marie, you kind of did the same thing too. You were wanting an app to help you get stuff done in a way that other apps weren't helping you. And that, like, the app I'm building is similarly like something where I feel like I shouldn't need something like this, but the reality is I do, and having it would be helpful. And that's a lot of like what I talk about in my book as well with ADHD is just like, if it's silly and stupid, but it works, then it's not silly and
It's
stupid.
not,
Like
yeah, it works for
finding
you.
whatever it is that works for you, like that is the goal. Like learn what works through the brain, try it. And if it stops working, that's fine. It's
Yeah.
probably going to stop working at some point because we
Hmm.
love novelty and novelty is always going to wear off of any new thing you try. So it's
Yeah.
all about like trying stuff out, rolling with the punches, moving on to something else as needed, and not feeling bad about it. Because I think that's where we get caught. It's so easy to
Yes.
feel like I'm a failure as an adult because I can't do this thing, because I can't make this phone call. And same, I'd probably start multiple businesses before calling the dentist. Like that
Right.
is, I do not want to
Worst.
make that phone call ever.
And I like my dentist. I just don't want to talk to them on the phone or pick
Exactly.
up the phone and dial it. I think that's right. Just like the first step for me was trying to deal with my own shame. And I think the next step that I think I'm in the kind of the golden era of right now is not hiding it. Like really
Hmm.
Yeah.
openly
Yeah.
saying, I'm not great at booking meetings. So, and just, letting that be a known thing because I'm great at other things. Like I don't have to be
Right.
good. I don't have to be the best person at booking, like at creating calendar events because I'm good at other stuff.
I mean, that's like half the content I create is just me confessing things that I struggle with.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then, yeah, a lot of people replying saying, I feel seen because we're all feeling that stuff.
Or they're replying like, I'm in this post and I don't like it.
Yeah.
I think what did you say? I feel seen and attacked.
Yeah, that's my favorite reply. I get that one a
That was you
lot.
told me.
That's my favorite one.
Well, awesome. Well, I mean, thanks everyone for joining us on this first episode. Obviously, we teased out a few future ones. We want to talk about our fundraising stories. So if anyone's out there thinking about like, how do I raise money for this idea I have, we'll share our stories and kind of what we know.
And I'll be taking notes for, who knows about my baby app, if I'm going to be doing
Yes.
funding or not. So I'll be
Hmm.
right along with the listener, like listening to every word.
Yep. And we can talk about, building product and different features and how to figure out which ones to put in and when. And, trying to be patient and going against I'm very impulsive and I want to put it all in, but sometimes with that, a bit of patience, it's like, oh, I don't actually need it, like Jesse said. But we can go through that as well.
I was also thinking, I almost asked this episode, and then I felt like this is probably a bigger conversation, but talking about like work schedule and work rhythm and stuff like that.
Mm,
Because I know
Yeah.
for me, one of the hardest things about working like an office job or a normal job is that it seems like they expect me to put out the same work for every hour that I work. And that is
Mhm.
mm,
just not how I function.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
mhm.
I'll do 40 hours of work in a compressed 4 hour period. And then I might do 4 hours of work in a long 40-hour period. That's just kind of how my work rhythm works. So I thought that might be worth talking about as well.
Working with your brain and your energy levels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think importantly, like the three of us aren't done. Like we're not some experts sitting on a mountain telling you how to do things. We're still in the trenches
Oh, yeah.
big time. So I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
I
yeah.
I think the other thing we were excited about on this putting the group of us together and this podcast together is we want to share what we're actively struggling with in building our businesses.
Mhm.
Obviously,
Totally.
For Jesse, what you're talking about with your little baby app is like getting started. Marie and I like keeping it going, growing, dealing with personnel things and customer service and surviving another day. I think that's that. And so I plan to get a lot of good advice, no pressure from Jesse and Marie. And I think that's we all want to learn from each other and learn from the listeners and hear from you guys.
And hold each other accountable.
Oh yeah, Jesse, we're
Yeah.
gonna be following up about that baby app.
Yep. Absolutely awesome. All right. Well, thanks everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks.